Hi, and welcome to Chapter 29, Learning Objective 5, where we're going to talk about our central bank system in the United States, the Federal Reserve. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. There we go. All right, so what's the function of the Federal Reserve System? We term it the Fed most of the time. And when we talk about our Federal Reserve System, it is the central bank of the United States. Most major countries most countries have a central banking system. Now, that central banking system might be an autonomous arm, as it is in the United States, or it might be part and parcel of the government, meaning it is controlled by a command economy. And so the government itself is the central banking system. Ours is a little bit different. It's kind of like the Supreme Court, in that the Supreme Court operates independently of the administrative process of government. Okay, so the Federal Reserve Board is in Washington, D.C., and there's 12 regional federal banks. And there's a board of governors, and the board of governors is 7 members, and a lot of them are the presidents of the central banks. I'm sorry, the presidents of the district banks in the United States. The chairman of the Federal Reserve is Jerome Powell currently, and this is kind of what he does. And he is appointed by the president in 4-year terms. All the board of governors, of which he is the president, have 14-year terms. So here's our map of the cities with Federal Reserve banks. So we're in District 7, Lake Michigan College is part of District 7. So that means that every bank that is in District 7 belongs to the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. There's also a smaller one over here in Detroit as well, but it's not recognized as one of the major Federal Reserve banks. Again, you'll see the Board of Governors there located in Washington, D.C. Now, one question I always have for students is, why do you think that there's so many districts in the eastern part of the United States versus the western? I mean, it's not a factor of population. It's actually a factor of when they were created. The Federal Reserve was created. So the Federal Reserve, created in 1913, as we currently know it, there were 2 other attempts at a central bank, and the first attempt was the First Bank of the United States. Then it was the Second Bank of the United States, and then finally we came up with the Federal Reserve. There's a lot of conspiracy theory which surrounds the creation of the Federal Reserve. If you're interested, you can go and pop on that link. It's about a 9-minute video, or you can go to the 3-hour part 3, part 2, 9 hours total of the history of banking in the United States. It's a fun movie, let me tell you. Okay, so our central bank, what is it that they do? So you'll want to know this. They regulate the amount of money in the economy. Now, the purpose of our Federal Reserve, or the purpose that the Federal Reserve was created for, was to be what we call the lender of last resort. This is the reason they were created. Today, they do a lot more than become a bank of banks. So there's the purpose of being a lender of last resort, to ensure that banks do not come insolvent. All right, so this is what the Fed does today. So lots of different things. So it acts like the bank of banks. Okay, again, the purpose, the lender of last resort. It monitors each bank's financial condition to ensure that they are not insolvent, and it clears checks. So anytime that you do a transaction, it goes through District 7 in this area and clears it through to ensure that if you're drawing on an account that's at Fifth Third and you bank at Chemical, then that gets all put to rights, meaning the bank, the Fifth Third would deduct that from the account, and then Chemical would get that amount. So it's all electronic, and about 95% of the world's currency in terms of US dollars is held electronically. So this happens all electronically in terms of clearing. Again, what exactly does the Fed do? The Fed uses 3 tools, which we're going to learn in upcoming objectives, on how they control the money supply. And much of what they do is based upon the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, and they set monetary policy. So in our course, we talk about two different policies. We talk about monetary policy, the amount of money in the money supply, and then we talk about fiscal policy, which is a deficit in the budget, or a surplus, and what we budget, how we take care of that scarce money that's being brought in. Okay, the Federal Open Market Committee is part of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, 7 members of the boards of governors. Okay, so 7 out of that. And again, 5 of the 12, New York being one that always sets on the FOMC. They meet about every 6 weeks. And if you're interested in knowing what the FOMC reports are, you can go to fomc.gov, and it will give you all of their minutes to their meetings that they have. Okay, so kind of going back to this idea right here is, what is it that they do? And I referenced 3 tools that the Fed uses to control the money supply, which we'll talk about a little more in upcoming objectives. But in this one, I just want to introduce you to one. And this is the #1 tool that the Federal Reserve uses to control the money supply. Okay, so this is tool 1, most used, and this is what we call OMO, or open market operations. Basically, it's the buying and selling of bonds. Could be bills as well. Difference between a bond and a bill: a bond is greater than 1 year, a bill is less than 1 year. So if the Fed, or FOMC, wants to increase the money supply, what they would do is buy bills and bonds from the public. So this is how it would work. So here is the public society, and here's the FOMC Fed. If the public holds a bill, a treasury bill out here, or bond, and the Fed says, hey, we want to buy it, and they will offer money for that, what will happen then is the public will sell those to the Fed. The Fed in return will give cash, and that's how they're increasing the money supply. If the Fed wants to decrease the money supply, again, here's the Fed, and we have the public, and the public now has dollars. And the Fed wants to decrease the money supply, and again, we'll talk about that in some upcoming. So what they would do in this case is they would sell bonds. So for sale. And a lot of the public and financial intermediaries and so on would see that as a good idea. So they would take this little bill, and what they would do is exchange that piece of paper for money, and the result would be a decrease in the money supply. So this is the #1 tool of the Federal Reserve. Okay, so we do know that all banks are members of this Federal Reserve. So what this means is, and I'll go back to my previous idea here. Here's Chemical Bank, and here is Fifth Third Bank. Both of these are members of the 7th District Fed in Chicago. The 7th District Fed is part of the Federal Reserve. Okay, so what happens is, when we're going to talk about fractional banking in an upcoming objective, but what you want to know at this point is it's up to the District Court of Chicago to ensure that if somebody pays another individual, that money is subtracted from Fifth Third, and then it is added to the chemical bank account. And again, all this happens electronically. Banks make money by loaning money out. Again, we talked about this previously. So we have savers and we have investors. So what a bank does is they sit in between here as a financial intermediary, and they take the savers' money and they pay interest on that money, say 3%. So savers are getting a 3% rate of return. The bank then couples all of these savings accounts together and loans it back out to other investors and charges them interest, and they have to pay, say, 5%. The bank then nets the 2%. So this is how banks make money. Now, what's interesting about this is that banks, the behavior of banks, can influence the amount of money, because some banks, and particularly after the Great Recession of 2008, they want to hold excess reserves. So what does that mean? What that means is that if a bank holds excess reserves, they're not turning around and loaning everything back out. They're kind of keeping a stockpile, a safety net, if you will. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay, so how did banks influence the money supply? And the one reason how they influence it is because they can have excess reserves, or they can loan those excess reserves back out. So here's an idea, and there are three different types of central banking that we have. So the first type of central bank that we have is 100%. This is where the banks make no loans. Okay, so if you deposit, say, $50 into your account, all right, so I'm going to say if I deposit $50 in my account at Chemical, then Chemical has to put that $50 into Chicago, and Chicago likewise puts it into the Fed. This creates no money in the money supply. So here's the important part. So with 100% reserves, meaning they don't get to keep anything to loan back out, so 100%, so there's no influence in the money supply. Okay, we're going to talk about the other types of central banking phenomena that we can see. So we've looked at 100%. There's also 0, where banks can take all the money and loan it right back out. And then there is what we have in the United States, which is called fractional reserve banking. And fractional reserve banking can be a little difficult to understand, but basically what it means is anytime you make a deposit, you're creating additional money in the money supply. We don't exactly print it. What happens is we continue to loan it back out, people deposit it, loan it back out, and through this cyclical process, that's really how we create money in our money supply. So I look forward to speaking with you next time about that. Till then, have a great day.